Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I want to welcome everybody who's here in person. It's so beautiful to see all of your faces. I want to welcome everyone who's online. Thank you for joining us this evening for this wonderful program. I want to open with just a very short word of Torah. So in this week's Torah portion, Titzaveh, it opens with the commandment to light the menorah, the sanctuary, the portable sanctuary, the Mishkan, that will travel with the Israelis in the desert. And we're supposed to light it, and it's supposed to be a ner tamid, a light that burns always, a constantly burning light. The rabbis, as you can imagine, have a lot of interpretations of what that light is supposed to represent. But I think that what resonates most with me tonight is the learning or the teaching that it's supposed to represent the light that we are supposed to see here under our ner tamid and then take out into the world. I can think of no better frame for a light of illumination than the beauty of bringing these three communities together. Rabbi Buchdahl, you talk in your book about the first time the three of you were together at Kehilat Jeshurun. But the beautiful thing is it has happened over and over again. And it's a really beautiful tradition we have here. And it's a light that I think should go out into the world of congregations gathering together, Orthodox, conservative, reform, of all different denominations, so beautifully. And here comes the commercial. If you like it tonight, there's another opportunity to come back to see it happen again. One of our traditions is every year we have what's called a Tekes Ma'avar, a beautiful celebration of moving from Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, into Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day. We celebrate it as the three communities together. This year, in addition, with the 92nd Street Y, it'll be held at the 92Y on April 21st. And in addition to these fabulous three rabbis, you'll get some fabulous cantors too. So it's again another beautiful way that we come together so often. So with that, Rabbi Cosgrove, I'm going to turn it over to you. Oh, I forgot. They need no introduction, no bio, but senior rabbi of KJ, Rabbi Chaim Steinmetz, senior rabbi of Central Synagogue, Rabbi Angela Buchdahl, and of course our senior rabbi here, Elliot Cosgrove. So thank you all for joining us, and Rabbi Cosgrove, over to you.
And thank you to Rabbi Kaufman for you and your team and all that goes into making everything happen and coordinating all of the efforts between the three synagogues. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet achim ve'achot beyachad, that we are all here together, our three communities, and the three of us, the three musketeers, back together again. But this evening, we are not just here to schmooze, we are here to celebrate and to champion and explore, Rabbi Buchdahl, your book, Heart of a Stranger, an unlikely rabbi's story of faith, identity, and belonging. True story. Yesterday, I had to buy a gift for someone, and I went to the place I always go when I need a piece of Judaica, to Doina, Judaica Classics, right there on 84th and Lexington. And I hope I get a discount by product placement here with Doina. So every so often, because I had a book for such a time as this, and I'd like get a little joy because I'd see Doina, I'm the community rabbi, I'm a few blocks away, I see it displayed prominently, yay. But it wasn't there yesterday. And I said, surely there might be a misunderstanding. Perhaps Doina knows what side her bread is buttered and put Rabbi Steinmetz's Despite Everything book prominently on display, a chronicle of Jewish resilience, but that too was nowhere to be found in Doina's display. What book, and I took a picture of this, was prominently displayed, pride of place, but Rabbi Buchdahl's Heart of a Stranger. You made it to the bestseller list, you made it to Doina. And I share this story because my reaction wasn't, who is this sort of East Side interloper on the Upper East Side? My reaction was one of joy and collegial pride and just celebrating the fact as I do with you, Rabbi Steinmetz, that we are all stronger and rejoice in each other's success. And I think that is part, not exclusively, of the secret sauce, that we are colleagues, we are friends, and we champion each other and defend each other and celebrate the communities we lead and the friendships. So it's with that sentiment that we open up tonight's program. We're going to be in dialogue for a bit, and then we're going to open it up for questions. And while the prompt of this evening is your new book, Rabbi Buchdahl, and none of us call each other rabbi when we're speaking in private, it is going to also be an opportunity for us to be in dialogue on the themes of the book. And one of the striking things about your book, Rabbi, is the personal dimension of it. And friends as we've been for many years, I discovered an incredible amount about you reading this book, and I said, I never knew that story about Angela. And it was also very clear that your rabbinate is a product, sort of a reflection emergent from your personal identity. So I'm wondering if you could share the positive, perhaps negative aspects of yourself that ultimately became Rabbi Buchdahl of national prominence.
So first of all, I just want to say thank you to my dear friend and Rabbi Elliot Cosgrove for hosting me. I did have the joy of hosting you at Central when you had your book published, and that was an incredible night. And it really felt fitting when he invited me to come. I said, let's do this, but let's invite Rabbi Steinmetz because we really have been a trio. I call it my East Side trifecta in the acknowledgments, but I really do feel deeply grateful that we have been in conversation and shaped each other in our rabbinates together over more than a decade now. So this feels really special for me to do this. And I thought, I've already done kind of a lot of book talks in New York, so I was like, let's do this differently. Let's not just talk about my book. Let's actually each of us talk about some of the things that come up in the book. So that's why I'm grateful that we can do it this way. So I will be honest, and I thought that what I really wanted to write was a book about Jewish spiritual wisdom in a very accessible way. I kind of dreamed that I would do like the Jewish Deepak Chopra book that would break out into the sort of spiritual books realm. Interestingly, I didn't get a lot of encouragement from my agent or publishing houses that would be something that would sell in the same way. And so their suggestion was make it a memoir, which I resisted at first for a lot of reasons. First of all, memoirs, in order to sell, have to be somewhat revealing. And I just was sort of like, I'm a rabbi. How much of this am I going to put out there? But I think what convinced me was the understanding and teaching, which I put in the acknowledgments, of my teacher of blessed memory, Rabbi David Ellenson, who said that all theology is autobiographical. And I think what that means is, our life struggles, our relationships with our parents, our families of origin, our triumphs as well as our pains, these are the things that shape the way we think about God, community, love, whether the world is good, safe, or dangerous. Like all of this stuff impacts the way that we actually read Torah and understand our theology. And so in a sense, I actually, instead of feeling like it was a concession to make this a memoir, I realized actually I do want to tell my own story, and then I want to teach the Torah and how I come to the Torah because of that story that I've lived. So the book is formatted with narrative chapters that are short, and each one has an accompanying Devar Torah. And I was saying to Rabbi Steinmetz that lahavdil, but I kind of almost think of it, it's like the way you have a Torah portion with a Haftarah portion. And so that Torah portion is often very narrative, and the Haftarah is sort of prophetic, sermonic, but they're always thematically linked. In some ways, in my mind, that was what I thought about as the format for the book. And I think that the name of the book itself, it comes to the heart of what my life experience is that shapes my deep theology, which is, this is obviously not an original title, as you all know. Knowing that we have the heart of a stranger is behind many of our commandments. Don't oppress the stranger. You know the heart of a stranger. You were strangers in the land of Egypt. So this runs throughout our Torah. And I realize that in many ways, as a biracial immigrant with a non-Jewish Korean mother who grew up in a tiny Jewish community and ends up as a rabbi, you can imagine there were many times that I felt like I was a stranger, and a lot of times that I felt apologetic for that, or less than because of that, or somehow the pain of feeling like a stranger. At some point, as I was doing my teaching and listening to other people speak, I realized that actually it has been in many ways the source of my connection, empathy, maybe my resilience, my having to find a different path. And actually that is the Jewish story. And so I think that that is a kind of a running theme throughout the book, although I touch on many other themes, but I think that that is, has been in some ways not, I'm the rabbi of Central Synagogue not despite the fact that I'm a Korean immigrant rabbi. I think actually the fact that I know what that feels like is probably the reason that I could become the rabbi of Central Synagogue, because when I dug past the surface of most people's stories in my community, everyone seemed to surface with, well, let me tell you, Rabbi, about why I also feel like I've been a little bit on the outside of the Jewish community, why I felt like I didn't know enough to feel like this was my inheritance. Or with my mother who converted, I felt like I was still different than everyone else, or with my different family, or whatever it is, they have their stories. So this is a very Jewish story in every way. It's our Jewish story. So I feel grateful that I was able to share it through the lens of my own personal one.
And so you feel that that is a thread of your present rabbinate, that you're able to serve your community knowing how you yourself felt, that when someone walks in for the first time, when someone's...
100%. I think, people will say things like, oh, your synagogue, it feels very warm and welcoming when I walk in. I don't even know exactly I can't put my finger on it, but I think I could articulate that I do not presume that when someone walks in that they feel belonging. I don't presume that when they walk in they feel like, oh, I know how to navigate my way here, or that I feel like I know enough, or I've done enough in my life to feel like I deserve kind of this standing. I actually feel like a lot of our folks come in feeling anxious or insecure in some way, or apologetic in their own ways. And so I think that there is some tone. It's not pedantic, and it's not even conscious. It's something I'm reflecting on later. But I do think that there is some way that I know we're creating a tone that says, we don't presume you feel that way. We're going to make sure, we're going to go out of our way to make sure you feel like you belong here, and that this is yours to own. And I think that that is very much a part of my rabbinate.
Which is an interesting question about the degree to which communities reflect the sensibility of their senior rabbis, right? I say, if you want warm and welcoming, go to Central Synagogue.
You did a pretty good job yourself, Rabbi.
So, Rabbi Steinmetz, when you hear this, I forgot Rabbi Ellenson of blessed memory's exact phrase that,
all theology is autobiographical.
Yeah. Perhaps you could share, I don't know if it applies to you, but does a thesis hold for you in terms of your own autobiography and how your own rabbinate emerged?
I would say absolutely. I think that many of the things I think about have to do with my own background. I also don't love talking about my background very much, although I've mentioned it in different occasions in sermons. I was born to a Holocaust survivor. My mother was a survivor of Auschwitz, which I think drives a lot of, certainly the peoplehood narrative within my own rabbinate. I was born a month after my father died in a car accident. I was actually born on the Shloshim. I am called to the Torah as Chaim ben Chaim, Chaim the son of Chaim. Almost, 80% of the time, the person calling me to the Torah gives me a look of like, what on earth is going on? 20% of the time, very often because they have a similar story with someone they know exactly why I'm being called as Chaim ben Chaim. And I would say that shaped my life. In other words, you speak about being an outsider. I have to tell you, growing up in a very tight-knit Jewish community where you're the only kid without a father is a very, very strange place to be. And you also feel, and I have to say as a kid, I would go to synagogue, and when it was the yahrzeit, when it was the time to say Kaddish, and they'd ask me to say Kaddish, and I would want to crawl under a table and disappear because I did not want to be singled out as a stranger, as someone who was so different. And I think that, yes, those things certainly, I mean, it really shapes who you are. It shapes the way you see the world. So embracing, recognizing that there are people who are different and that those people need to be made felt at home is very much a part of my autobiography. But I have to tell you, having a mother who is a survivor like that sort of shifts your perspective on a lot of things. First of all, my mother, like most survivors, had an incredible amount of determination, which also sort of changes who you are. So absolutely, I mean, that's really been my autobiography. We have to hear now your autobiography, Rabbi Cosgrove.
No, I'm just moderating this. I don't.
You can't get away with moderating.
We at Park Avenue don't believe in self-revelation. We buttoned up. So, thank you. We're like in group therapy here. Okay, so I guess to put myself in the therapeutic couch, a little more. I don't know if it's less or more dramatic. 2 data points. Number one is the fact that my grandfather of blessed memory, who was exiting this world as I was entering this world, was a congregational rabbi in Glasgow, Scotland, an Orthodox rabbi. So I never knew the man, but I grew up in a household where I heard about growing up in a rabbi's household. So I would say that for me, probably there's some dimension of my rabbinate, which is getting to know someone who I never knew. So I would say that. And then probably the moment where I was thinking of becoming a doctor or a lawyer, but at University of Michigan, my Judaism was something that I practiced at home, but it wasn't something I took with me onto campus. And my community has heard this story on several occasions, but there was a very charismatic, amazing institution builder who's still very much alive, but very much retired, Michael Brooks of the University of Michigan, Hillel. And not only did he build like the gold standard of Hillels on campus, but he also had a personal touch of tapping people. And the way I met Michael was someone had passed away in my family, a guy, Mr. Gendon, who was someone who would come for Seders, a grandfather figure. I went in my junior year to the Hillel that Friday night. I had actually asked my friend where the Hillel was. I wasn't really connected to Jewish life. They said, "You're an idiot. It's this big building right in Central Campus." And but I wasn't actively practicing Judaism. And I went, I said Kaddish for Mr. Gendon. I stood up like at the end of an airplane ride just to get out the door. Michael, I didn't know he was Michael then. He stood between me and the door. I tried to get past him. He blocked my path and he said, "I want to invite you to Shabbos dinner." And I lied, and I told him I already had Shabbos plans because it was dollar pitcher night. It was dollar pitcher night at Rick's that night, and he said, "Well," and something that changed my life. He said, "Well, I bet you don't have Shabbos plans next week," and I was caught. And he said, "Good, so you'll come for Shabbos dinner." And I did, and then I joined the Hillel board, and I became editor of the Jewish Student Paper and the head of the Israel Club, and here I am, your rabbi now. And so that story has always been sort of the biography that shaped the vocation, because we sit around and we talk about the dreams and the programmatic responses to the Jewish people and big global anti-Semitism, Israel diaspora, blah, blah, blah. But for me, it's a retail business. It's one-on-one. It's looking around very much as you, Rabbi, describe, who's the person in the room who's never been here before? Who is the person who looks a little out of sorts, a little uncomfortable, and actually saying hello, wishing that person a good Shabbos, and one-on-one business.
Were you named for that grandfather that passed before you?
No.
No.
So Yeah, but yeah, there's no story in my life of when did Elliot find religion, in that, or the brother who became
Sounds
a rabbi.
like religion found you.
Yeah, well, it was, you know, I have one brother who works for YouTube, another in the movie, but like my parents think that's weird. But like nice Jewish kids grow up to be rabbis in my world. But I mean, Rabbi Buchdahl, so much of your own, you know, as a woman, Korean, a non-Jewish mother, you know, this outsider status. So, Rabbi, do you, I mean, you're male, Ashkenazi, you know, like, do you ever feel as an Orthodox rabbi as an outsider?
I mean, there's certainly, look, when I was younger and I hadn't been exposed to, let's say, other faith communities or to even non-Orthodox synagogues. So the irony is that if you're a non-Orthodox Jew and you go into an Orthodox synagogue, you feel like an outsider, but the reverse is also true. And I remember like early on in my rabbinate, I mean, I have a lot of different anecdotes of like meeting people, you know, meeting ministers and priests and sort of like beginning to understand a world that's outside of my own. And when you venture into a world that's outside of your own, you always feel like a stranger. You always feel like an outsider.
Right. One of the things we discovered, or many of the things I discovered in your book, were not just about you, but about your family. How your husband Jacob proposed to you, like on your twice, and you said yes on the second time. So first of all, what was that like? And I'm not unaware. I know Lisa's not here. My wife is here, so we're treading on very, you know, delicate ground here.
We can
but
take this off.
Did you have to clear those passages? Was there, like, your kids say it's okay? I mean, we all use our families as
Fodder for
sermons. So how does that work in the drafting and the crafting, and how sort of, you know, the status of a corporate spouse and raising kids in the public eye? Maybe you could give us some insight onto that.
Okay. First of all, I just have to say one of my favorite memories is the night that the three of us were at KJ for the first, you and I were there together for the first time, which was about 12 years ago. Our families, our children, who did not want to sit through a boring talk from their parents, ended up all hanging out at your house. And our children were at Heschel together, and friends. Like many of our children match up age-wise and our friends. And when we ended up coming back to your house after the event, apparently the whole evening's conversation was like, pros and cons of being rabbis' kids. And they were like, you know, going through the list, and I thought that was funny. And anyway, mostly it was pros, actually. I think our kids are pretty happy. And it's funny for me to talk about, you know, the first proposal from my husband and I. In the front row are two people, dear college friends who knew Jacob when he and I were 18, and he made that proposal. I would just say that the first proposal was like under the influence of the evening's drinking, and it was at 2 in the morning, and it didn't seem particularly serious. So
I'm sure it was very sincere.
It took 6 more years for him to say it with more sincerity and more seriousness, and then I said yes. But I would say that, you know, it's a funny thing to write a memoir because, as you point out, you're not just telling your own story. You're telling your family's story, your children's story, your you know, parents, colleagues even, and I was very sensitive to what it meant to do that. In fact, not only did I read 9 memoirs in my sabbatical before I set out to write one, but I read this book called How to Write a Memoir. And among the things it said is like, be careful about how much you're talking about other people, and how do you do that? So for all the people that were closest to me, I let them read drafts of the book. And without fail, everyone who read the book, like my mother, my father, my sister, my husband, my mother-in-law, they all said, oh, it's all great, just this one little part about me I want you to change. And it's so funny, they were often like really little things. My husband insisted that the hot pink ski jacket was not really hot pink, it was faded red. I want to say that amazingly, I was at Shabbat dinner at the Zabar's house a couple of weeks ago, and Brett Zabar said, I'm going to answer this once and for all. He says, I have a picture of Jacob in that ski jacket. And I was like, you do not. And he found, it was 35 years ago, this picture, but he actually found it. And Jacob and I looked at the picture together, and we still argued about whether or not it was hot pink or ski or faded red. Anyway, it was my mother-in-law's, well, can you just not tell that one story about me and how I parented? And so everyone has their stories. And I think what's interesting about memory, and we all know this, is you could live through an experience with another person and have you were in the exact room together, and your memories of it will be different. My sister and I have very different experiences of our mother as a mother. And we lived in the same house for, however many years together. So I think that there is something very powerful about memory and how we remember things. And that becomes a tricky thing when you write a memoir. Not tricky, I would just say that I had to kind of give the caveat that this is the way I remember it. And it might be different than the way someone else remembers it. But I tried to be as faithful as I could to my memory, knowing that it is still fallible in some way. I mean, I think what it is to be a corporate spouse. I think your wife, Debbie, is Debbie here? I don't know. I thought I saw her. Yeah, there she is. Hi, Debbie. Debbie, I have to say, she really kind of sets an incredibly high bar for Rebbitzin. She is an amazing Rebbitzin. And I know your wife is as well. Jacob is as well, but he, doesn't lead trips and didn't teach classes. So I'm not that I'm, not that it's that I'm holding him to that standard, but I would say that I feel very fortunate that Jacob really sees being my partner as part of his sacred service to the Jewish community, actually. And I'm also grateful that he is an extreme extrovert and loves being around people and has never once even asked a question about whether or not he should show up at services. He's just always there every Friday night. And so I think that that's a gift. I do think that for my kids, at varying levels, they were more interested in showing up a lot or not. That felt age appropriate, but all of them have a very, I think I'm very grateful that as rabbis' kids, they have very positive relationships to their Judaism. My middle son, I think, wants to be a rabbi, and I might even get one more out of the three. We'll see. The third one is a computer science major. I think we're done. But I think, but it's not about whether or not they become rabbis. It's more just that they saw what we do and said, I really think that's a worthy pursuit, whether or not they actually do it, and that they really felt embraced by the Jewish community. So I think it's been a good role for them.
Net good.
Net good. I think if our kids were to have that conversation again, they'd say net good.
Well, maybe the next program we'll have our kids up here.
Oh my God, they would love that.
What it's like. So what about you, Rabbi?
I would just say, look, my daughter, who is a diabetic and a celiac, so, there's a certain template that everyone uses for their college essays, which has to do with their struggles and challenges in life. And she's a diabetic and a celiac, and she wrote her college essay about being a rabbi's daughter. Just so you get the story. So I would say— I
think it's harder in an Orthodox community.
It is. It is because there are also certain expectations of how she should act, which she didn't necessarily want to follow, or any of my kids. I would say that I had one or two of my sons thought about it for a half a minute, but they saw what it's about, and I think they felt that it would be too intense. My daughter liked to joke that she would be the rabbi in the family, but I think it wouldn't work for her, and it's not her area of interest. Being a spouse, Lisa, you made me think about this. I mean, tonight she's representing us both at a wedding, which I couldn't go to because I'd already committed to this. I thought about it and I said, yes, she loves Jewish community, and she probably does a lot of what she does because she loves community. But she certainly does more of it because she loves me, and she's just doing it to support me. And for that, I'm forever grateful. But it's hard. Okay, there's 3 more Shivas this week. Okay, wait, what's happening? I mean, if she decides whether she goes or doesn't go. But it becomes very, very heavy, and it's not that easy. She didn't sign up for this. I don't think that anyone ever goes to a spouse of a rabbi and says, this is what you're signing up for. But she's terrific, and that's a testament to, I guess, the ways she supports me.
Are you allowed to talk about this when Debbie's in the room?
Yeah, no, I need to make a few tactical choices. Yeah. So, well, the biographical part of this is when I was in Israel, and Debbie and I began dating by way of my brother who connected us. It was my brother called Debbie and said he's thinking of going to rabbinical school. Talk him out of it, and so karma has a way of being wicked. So I'm not going to talk about my marriage because she's there. I will simply say the biggest decision I made in my life is the best decision I made in my life. But in terms of the question of my kids, I have this same struggle with my children. They're all in their messy early 20s of figuring out what they do, and I believe that each one in very different ways would make an amazing rabbi. It could be camp, it could be Hillel, it could be pastoral, it could be intellectual, scholarly, leadership positions. And I know, because I've been in this parenting gig for a bit, that if you say something, that can result in the opposite reaction. And so I'm kind of caught betwixt and between of opening my mouth or not. And so I have, and I think it's okay that I share this, is I've pulled each one of them aside, and I've said, I'm in this dilemma, but I will not go through my life without letting you know that you have all the skill sets based on what I know of the rabbinate to be an amazing rabbi. Now go choose what you want to do, because I recognize the demands of being a rabbi. I recognize it's not a choice for everyone, and and they need to own that decision, whatever they do. So, it's a crazy life we've chosen.
I mean, that's a good question, though. Like, I have a chapter on, what I thought it was to be a rabbi, and then kind of the reality of what it is. And I also recognize that being the rabbi of Central Synagogue is not what it was to be the rabbi of Temple Bethel in Tacoma either. So, like, it can be very different to be in different kinds of communities. But, how does your rabbinate surprise you from what you thought you were going to be doing as a rabbi, leading, these kind of flagship congregations that you're leading?
I had no idea what I was going into. So I'll be very honest. I mean, we once, years ago, there was an evening where we had the young couples in the community together, and we did sort of a version of the dating game where you asked each person, or the newlywed game, where you ask each people about each other. And the question was, and my wife and I were amongst the couples in there, is at what point did your spouse decide on their career? And I was separate from my wife, and in my head, I knew the answer that I would say, but I wasn't sure she would say it. In any case, so I shaded my answer towards what I thought she would say, and she got exactly what I would say. And the answer she gave is, when did your husband decide to become a rabbi? He hasn't decided yet. That was the line. And that's been my line. In other words, well, I don't know, I haven't decided yet. When I started, I really started into it because I just loved learning. I loved learning Torah. I loved being in yeshiva. I saw this just as a way to hang on, to keep studying. Like, I'd gone to yeshiva, and then it was like, okay, now you have to make a living. All right, I'll keep going to yeshiva. And now I've got a way to make a living. And that actually was the revelation, because being a rabbi is not about studying Torah. You need to study Torah, you need to know Torah, but it is not at all about studying Torah. It is about loving your congregation and having a passion for the Jewish people and for Judaism and for the people that are around you. So it's a totally different mission. And it took some painful years to sort of learn it. I mean, I always liked people, but I really sort of adjusted myself in some ways, or I grew, to really put it in a actually a more accurate way, to learn how to love people. And that actually became who I was. I mean, there are times where I do miss the learning and the reading and, having a stack of books and just going through them. But this is, you have to own your choices, and this choice has actually been a great choice for me.
I would say similarly, I think that there were a few ways that parts of Jewish life lit something up in me that it began when I was a kid. It was Jewish music, and for some reason, Jewish music, and I had this amazing song leader that kind of swept through Tacoma for a few years and started a children's choir and taught me Debbie Friedman. And whether or not that feels like, there are definitely people who would say that's not Jewish music, that's just James Taylor with Hebrew words, but it was, to me, I was singing it in synagogue, I was singing it on the swing set, it was just joyful. And so that was kind of the first language. When I went on the Bronfman Fellowship when I was 16 to Israel, which was really a study program, that was the first time that I really encountered sort of Jewish learning on a high level in a way that it was like fireworks were going off in my brain. I was so excited by the learning. And I thought to myself, wow, there is a job where your job is to kind of do Jewish music and prayer and learning, and this is what you get to do with your life all the time. And I would say that is part of what it is to be a rabbi, but I do think that it is a much smaller part than I kind of expected knowing. I do get to have I do think that every Friday night, Shabbat for me still is a transcendent experience that I feel grateful that I get to be a part of within community every week. And I get to have kind of the fantasy of the learning, the stack of books and Jewish learning. For high holidays, I'll prepare for a sermon in a different way. But for, a traditional, a weekly sermon, that is not what we get to do. We don't get to immerse ourselves in learning in the same way. I think you have to become almost an academic rabbi if that's what you want to do. But the trade-off has been that you learn the Torah that comes through lived experience, through relationship, it's the godliness that's the electricity, as Buber says, between two people when they're really seeing each other. And that has been deeply gratifying, and I think that I didn't know how that would feel. I agree. Yeah. What about you, Rabbi?
So earlier in the week, you and I had a bit of an exchange on this. The best thing and the worst thing about my days are the same thing, meaning being a rabbi is the best job in the world in the following sense, that you get to study when you can, think thoughts, shape conversations, reflect our tradition through the prism of our personalities. Basket number one. The three of us get to lead not insignificant, not-for-profit institutions in the greatest city of the world, and we interact as an interfaith and civic affairs in all sorts of ways, fundraising, building community, staff, all the things that go into running institutions of our respective sizes. And then number three is we are invited in a way that always sort of startles me, into the most intimate, sacred sorrows and simchas of people's lives in an extraordinary way that is, for me, is really the fuel of my rabbinate. I thought, actually, at a certain time in my career that I would be an academic, and as someone once said, decide what you love more, Jews or Judaism, and I love Jews more. They also bug me, but so that is the best thing, that on any given day you get to exercise multiple different muscle groups from morning to night. The worst part is that you're called on to exercise different muscle groups, and you will go from a staff meeting or a fundraising meeting to have to, I haven't written my sermon for Shabbos yet, and it's Thursday evening right now. I know it's going to get done, but it hasn't happened yet, and not to mention the meetings and the pastoral meetings and everything, and you're spread thin, and you feel that you're not doing any of it quite as well as you want. So that can be exhausting and stretched thin, but thrilling all at the same time. So that was, you know, Rabbi, the book is not a post-October 7th book. It's clearly, it ends, you know, there, but it is not a book.
Ish, yeah.
Ish, yeah. And so I'm wondering, now a couple years have passed, and thank God the hostages, either living or murdered, have been repatriated and returned to their homes. There's a very tenuous ceasefire right now. We're in a different place than we were a year ago and certainly 2 years ago. So how has your rabbinate changed from that sort of immediate post-October 7th moment to now, and what does that reflect about the community as a whole, or your community?
So I started writing this book and the proposal when I was on sabbatical in 2020. So it's a long project, 5 years. I mean, the writing part was maybe 4 because it was in fits and starts. I did like writing and then I didn't write for 10 months. So as you might imagine, when I started this, I actually, in my book proposal, had a proposed table of contents, and it ended before October 7th because there was no October 7th when I sold this book in 2021. And so it's a strange thing that, you know, the last 6 chapters are all things that I couldn't have known were going to happen to me, and they were some of the most dramatic chapters. It included the Colleyville hostage crisis. It included a whole scandal around sexual predatory practices of a rabbi that had been in my community. And then, of course, you can't have a rabbi's memoir without an October 7th chapter, and so, of course, I had that. I would say that one of the things that I know that I'll just say about the publishing world is the publishing world changed in those 5 years since I sold the book as well. I would say that I'm not sure that I would have been able to sell this book in the same way after October 7th. I would say that my, you know, in the safety of this community, that like, you know, I think my publisher was the most anxious about that chapter in the whole book. I think worried that like if this was going to be a book that was going to go outside the Jewish community, that there was going to be some way that that was going to sort of set people off in a certain way and taint the book for wider non-Jewish audiences. They had a sensitivity reader who was this gay black man read that chapter so that he could kind of give me feedback on it, interestingly. Luckily, he didn't actually give me that much feedback that I had to change anything, but it was just interesting that this is, just to give you the sense of the landscape we were in. And colleagues of ours, like you wrote an explicitly post-October 7th book, so that there was no hiding what that was, but colleagues who wrote other Jewish books post-October 7th and tried to get them out in the world found that they were getting pushback from people. You know, it's hard to explain how different the publishing world has been for Jewish books in the last couple of years. So I'll just say that as one piece of this. Boy, what do I say? I think that our work has never felt more urgent, anxiety-producing, polarized, and in many ways engaged and meaningful. So I think that, you know, it's not just a phenomenon of people who, after October 7th, felt in their kishkas how much they actually really deeply cared, both about Israel and also about their Judaism in a different way. And we also saw people who also felt the extreme sense of upset about what was happening in the war. So we saw a lot of polarization. But I would say that I also think that people are even more than ever desperate for Jewish community. And so we're seeing, I think that we have all experienced this kind of what's been deemed the surge, but a doubling of the number of people who want to convert to Judaism in our conversion class, which now has more than 300 people a year in it. And really a kind of, we moved up into the balconies for services on Friday night, and we've never stopped. Like, we haven't gotten smaller again. So I think there is something to what people are still seeking, and we want to make sure that we actually take this opportunity to engage people deeper, not in fighting anti-Semitism, which we will have to do, but in joyful, meaningful Judaism. And I think that that is, and I think that people really feel it deep in their bones in a very different way right now. And that's actually been very meaningful as a rabbi, although the work feels like without limit.
What about you, Rabbi? Have you seen changes in your community or the broader landscape from a few years ago to now?
I see Look, I mean, I do see some of the negatives also. I mean, there are Jewish kids who have turned on Israel, turned on our community, but the surge has been remarkable. It's really been remarkable. There is this increased intensity and passion for things that are Jewish. We've had multiple children in our community named after hostages who were murdered, who they decided, and I would like hear them name the baby, and it would be like, whoa, this is the name, you know, so there's that part of it. There's also increased anxiety, and that actually, in other words, passion is good for the community. Anxiety is good in really small amounts, because the anxiety ends up creating, division within the community, because people say you're not worried about what I'm worried about. And in other words, we're all in danger, and if you don't have the same sets of worries, or you don't have them, express them in the same way, then you're my enemy as well. I mean, that's what happens when you have a lot of anxiety. A little bit of anxiety is always good, because we should never, ever be completely comfortable. I'm just saying this to a Jewish audience here. You need to know that. A little bit of anxiety is really important.
Well,
very
your
Jewish.
wife is a therapist, right? So it's...
Yeah, so this is important to know. But that's the negative side of the post-October 7th world, where you have people sort of fighting other Jews. And I say, really, we know who our enemies are. And boy, we've got a lot of them now. We have to stop fighting each other. We have to recognize that we're watching the United States have a rising tide of anti-Semitism, which is predominantly amongst young people, which is really frightening, because it means that it could be, I don't think so, but 20 years from now, we're going to be dealing with much more anti-Semitism. So the anxiety could end up causing us to fight each other, rather than stand together and fight the good fight for our people.
Yeah, I definitely think that, the way you're describing it, that some of my greatest fears are the fissures within the Jewish community, not the enemies outside of our Jewish community, or who would seek to do us ill. I think that, when I wrote a book and described the surge, it was all about standing shoulder to shoulder with our brothers and sisters in Israel, and against the threat of anti-Semitism, which wasn't just a threat, but truly experienced here in our communities and in like-minded communities, and not imagined. And I feel now we've entered into a new chapter where it is trying to keep the communities and community together, which is the task of a rabbi, which is complicated, because oftentimes rabbis take the role of, the prophetic leadership role. This is where we should be on issue X. We need to take a stand. We need to be here. And more, I find myself playing the role of, guys, just keep it together, right? The only ones who are winning right now are those who would really seek us to do harm. I do believe, and we might not all agree on everything here. We can show a little, of that too.
We are Jews.
We are Jews. I worry, but I don't blame those young people who feel alienated from what I call the OJC, the organized Jewish community. I think if we define, first of all, Judaism is not Zionism, and Zionism is not Judaism. I think Zionism is a growth out of Judaism, and I can't imagine a Jewish identity without Zionism in it, but I don't believe it's one and the same thing. And I believe we do ourselves a disservice when we give expression to the only way one can be part of the OJC is to be aligned with this or that Israeli government on this or that Israeli policy. And when we do that, we have only ourselves to blame when those young people feel themselves outside of the tent. And so the theme that my congregants in the room know, and I keep coming back to it, is we have to be unflinching about defending the Jewish tent. We also need to expand the Jewish tent so those voices feel that they have a place. So
I'm in agreement. I mean, I think, the anxiety piece you're talking about, I think is very real, because it's we as Jews are accustomed to being in disagreement with each other. But I think when our anxiety level is extreme, it's not just that your side is wrong, but your side is perhaps immoral or even existentially threatening to me. And when you get to that place, then you kind of have to pick a side. And that is what we've seen happen in our communities over and over, and I think we want to be very careful. It's not that I want to ignore that there are real dangers and threats to our community, but I think sometimes the outsized fear of what might be possible is actually causing us to pit ourselves against each other in a way that I think is very dangerous. And I think you're right. I think we can stand for what we stand for, and we can be proud in that and proclaim that, and yet leave space for Jews who think differently and say, you can still be here. You can stand with your values. I mean, we as a Jewish community, I say this many times, it's not just a Jewish joke of 2 Jews, 3 opinions. It is actually a structural, it's a structural theological strategy of the Jewish people that we have not been a people that has only one religious authority. Even in Israel with the chief rabbi, you have to have an Ashkenazi chief rabbi and a Sephardi chief rabbi. We've never had a pope because we don't want to say there's only one way to be Jewish and one authority. And as long as there have been Jews, there have been denominations of Jews: Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, Zealots. Now we'll call it Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, Zionist, Anti-Zionist, whatever it is. But I think that the fact is, we've never just said there's only one way you can be Jewish, and I would say thank God for that. As much as in some ways I don't think our denominational ties mean as much as they might have a couple generations ago, I'm actually also really grateful that there are different flavors and ways of being Jewish, that it is only strengthens our Jewish community, that there are going to be some Jews that their Jewishness is most fully realized in an Orthodox setting and at Rabbi Steinmetz's congregation, and for others it will be yours, and in others it will be Central or somewhere else that's much smaller perhaps. I think that it is only good for the Jewish community that we can have an ecosystem in which all of these houses can flourish. And I think that sort of pluralism has been at the heart of who we are as a Jewish people, and we don't want to forget that.
So I want to build on. I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll open it up for a question or two. So there's a chapter about us in the book, which is kind of...
I read that one first.
Yeah.
I didn't give you that one first because I just mentioned you nicely.
Yeah,
but I did give it to Rabbi Steinmetz because I worried that it might get him in trouble. And I said, I want you to read this and make sure you're okay with me putting this in the book.
So right, I'm a footnote in that chapter. You two are the main characters. So it was that moment that you've both referenced at different times of welcoming the two of us, but I think it's in your book, the power of being welcomed to the KJ pulpit in dialogue that evening. And I'm wondering, Rabbi Steinmetz, what was that like? Give us the inside baseball. Was that high drama to do what you did? Had there ever been a Reform rabbi, a Reform female rabbi?
Can I just set the stage for a minute in case people don't know? I mean, you have to know, I said this in the book, but for about 100 years, there had been a dynasty of Lookstein family rabbis, and then Rabbi Steinmetz was the first non-Lookstein rabbi in 100 years at KJ, and he was a brand new rabbi. And the topic of conversation in the Orthodox world at that time was how women could never, ever, ever, ever be called rabbis. Okay, so I just want to say that in that context, and I will also add that no sideswipe in any way, but I had never had a conversation with his predecessor. I don't think he had ever reached out, and I don't think there had ever been a Reform rabbi on the bima of KJ. So that's the context of this brand new rabbi who is not a Lookstein doing this.
So to be very honest, I was really new here.
You didn't know what you were doing, did you?
I didn't know what I was doing, and I just thought it would be really interesting. And it was literally because we had a slot to fill, and I said, this would be a great program. I remember going to Rabbi Weinstock, this will be a great program. I'm new here. This is going to be great. I did not get a lot of pushback. The honest truth is that because KJ itself, even though Rabbi Luxin had never reached out to you, that had always been sort of their standard of practice, was that they saw themselves as a synagogue that was part of the Jewish world. And Rabbi Joseph Luxin and Rabbi Neidich, who was the rabbi here, they would actually have a pulpit switch, which I heard about. I haven't been able to anywhere confirm this, but this is what I've heard about. But to be more, one thing that certainly has been confirmed is that Rabbi Luxin's great-grandfather, who was known as the Ramaz, Rabbi Moshe Zvulun Margolis, who was an Eastern European rabbi with a very long beard, went to Temple Emmanuel for, I'm forgetting his first name now, Marshall's funeral, who was one of the big Jewish leaders, and he sat in the front row. And he didn't have a problem being in a Reform synagogue. He did not have a problem being part of the community. He was involved in the beginnings of the Joint Distribution Committee. So the synagogue has always had this practice. So some members of the synagogue were unhappy, not enough to really have made appreciable. And then, of course, I got a lot of incoming from outside of the synagogue. But I was kind of too new here to sort of know it, and I just thought it would be a great evening, and actually this really started where we got to know each other.
Well, you're still here.
Yeah, we're still talking.
Yeah. So, and what about you, Rabbi? For you to experience this hachnasat orchim, this welcoming of a guest, and I mean that must have been quite a moment for you.
It was. I mean, I was so very touched by the invitation, and for me, there's plenty of this in the book to tell the story, but my own questions of authenticity have always been at the fore, and in particular, while I was embraced pretty warmly generally by the Reform movement, and in general kind of more progressive Jews, I had always felt very intimidated in Orthodox spaces, and so it was a very big deal that Rabbi Steinmetz invited me. And I will say that it started something that, like now, 12 years later, not do we only do events like this and Tekes Ma'avar, which we hope you'll join for, but talks on JBS. And importantly, what you might not know is we regularly meet with like visiting groups from Israel, and they cannot get over the fact that the three of us are friends, that we talk to each other, that we are in each other's houses of worship. They think this blows their mind almost more than anything. We don't have to say a word. It's just us sitting next to each other.
They're disappointed there isn't yelling.
Yeah, that's right. They're disappointed there's not yelling. So I want to say what a big deal it was. I will say, though, that like these roots of feeling like you have the heart of a stranger, they can go very deep, and that I had this experience, which I shared in the book, which is that I was already, I think, 41 or 42 years old. I was named the rabbi of Central Synagogue. I had just had this opportunity to do blessings at the White House. You'd think that I would feel pretty confident in my position. I stepped into KJ's sanctuary, and there were like 400 Jews there. And I had like one of those Woody Allen moments. Do you know in that when he's at the dinner table and he thinks that everyone looks at him like he's got the payas? Okay, but it's the opposite. I was like everyone was looking at me like, she's not Jewish. And I had that feeling. I like started looking around, and I really thought to myself, oh my God, if I actually asked someone in the pew, do you think I'm actually halachically Jewish? I realized they would probably say no. So then I was just looking around at a room full of people that I was like, none of these people think I'm a Jew. And it sounds kind of funny. It was not funny in that moment. I actually started to have a panic attack in that moment. I don't think you guys would have known this because I can cover, but my palms started sweating and my heart rate started racing, and the first few questions were like a blur. I could barely answer because I was having this crazy dialogue in my head that like what am I doing up on the bima of this Orthodox synagogue? And I'm going to get found out. And I think that is something that I think that I don't imagine that most people have experienced exactly that. It's in some ways, but that was a story that reminded me that those roots can be very deep. And and I shared with with Rabbi Steinmetz and Cosgrove before I got on, that like my son is now studying in an Orthodox yeshiva, and he had the same questions come up for him now another generation later, where they're allowing him to study at the yeshiva, but they won't let him count in a minyan or have an aliyah or lead services. And so that's painful for me, and to feel like it wasn't just in my head that that's actually a thing. And one of the things that I think is deeply remarkable about Rabbi Steinmetz in particular, that I now understand even more the roots of, is just that Ahavat Yisrael, the love of the Jewish people, is like his primary value, and you see that played out in so many different ways.
Thank you. Let's take one or two questions, which is a statement followed by a question mark. Brief. Yes, right up front here.
There's a mic coming to you.
So I'm really moved by your statements about having the heart of a stranger. And just as a very quick backup, there's a very important question here. We have one daughter who's adopted.
You got to just ask the question.
Right. How do you help children who are of two worlds, a Nupiat Eskimo and raised in a Jewish home? How do you support them to be able to merge their identity and not feel like a stranger everywhere?
So my mother, when I was feeling like I didn't belong anywhere, like when I was in America, I was like, oh, I'm not American. And then when I was in Korea, they were like, but you're not actually Korean. And when I was in the Jewish community, it was like, well, are you really Jewish? All of that. My mother said to me, home is wherever your people are. So to begin with, like, I also found belonging everywhere I went as well, even though I often felt like an outsider. The other thing I'd say is just to celebrate all of it, and also to remind them that every Jew is carrying multiple identities. Not all of them are on their face the way they are for me, but they're carrying identities of, oh, I'm gay and I'm Jewish, and I'm a Southerner and I'm Jewish, or I'm an atheist and I also, or whatever it is, or I'm American and they're navigating that. Like, all of us in the modern world have multiple identities that are often playing out within us, and that's okay. That's part of what it is to be human. And I think that the last thing I'd say, and this I learned in the lesson, and there's a little Devar Torah in here about my mother, who always felt like such a stranger when she first came to America. And this is a story that I tie in with the Abraham story. Why does Abraham go so out of his way to welcome people in his tent? In fact, there's a crazy midrash that after he's circumcised at age 99, God makes the day oppressively hot so that he won't welcome guests. But Abraham can't stop himself. He stands at the tent of his, at the opening of his tent, and this is when he welcomes 3 strangers that tell him he's going to have a child. I understood that in the context of my mother, who became obsessively welcoming of other people once she moved to America. She became an ESL teacher and welcomed hundreds of immigrants. And then I can't go into it, but all I would say is what I realize is when you are feeling like a stranger, if you can welcome someone else who is a little bit more stranger than you suddenly feel like my mother became the American when she welcomed her sisters in, right? And the Abraham was a stranger in a strange land. He circumcised himself, but then he could welcome the strangers who were in the desert. He feels more at home. So this act for your child or for whoever it is that feels like a stranger, there's always someone else who needs a welcome, and you create that sense of belonging when you find your people.
Beautiful. Okay, last, who's out there in the back? Yes. With the microphone, please.
Okay. I'm a KJ person.
Thanks for coming.
Nothing wrong with that, just,
No, I'm not apologizing. And I was at the meeting that you talked about at KJ. I had met Rabbi Cosgrove before. I had never met Rabbi Buchdahl, as I remember. There was no pushback.
No what?
Pushback from our shul and our community that I heard.
I need a question.
My question is, you and I share a connection to Yale and an affinity for Yale. And my question is, aside from the fact that you met your husband there, how did Yale influence you moving forward to where you are today?
I mean, it really it was everything, but I'll just say quickly from the Jewish perspective. I was a kid from Tacoma with 300 Jewish families, and it was pretty far from the immigrant Jewish experience. I landed at Yale in 1990, and it was 25% Jewish, but it felt like it was even more. And I couldn't get over the fact that, like, I was in a singing group that was not a Jewish singing group, but we called all our little things in between the songs shtick. And the shtick were things like these shticks that were so Jewish. And I couldn't believe that it wasn't like that the whole group was Jewish. It was just this sense that, like, Jewish culture, humor, literature was so pervasive in this way that made me so deeply proud. It just immersed me into a kind of East Coast Judaism. It made me want to live in New York. It's part of the reason I'm at Central Synagogue, is I was like, this fantasy of, like, New York Jewish life, which in many ways I kind of picked up and felt when I was in college at Yale. I think, first of all, I do think that New York is the most incredible place to be able to live a Jewish life and to raise a Jewish family. There's kind of nothing like it. But I think that also introduced me to the joy of that, in addition to incredible friends and my husband, and now a place that all three of my children ended up as well. But thanks for asking.
So we reviewed some questions, but in the spirit of the month of Adar, I'm going to break the rules, and I am going to ask you a question you have no idea is coming.
Oh, great.
So the festival of Purim is coming, and so Rabbi, give us Torah on Purim. Give us Torah. What's the message that we should all be taking with us?
You're looking for sermon ideas.
I gotta preach.
Look, the thing that hit me this morning, speaking of the people of the surge, was that Esther was a person of the surge. Esther is a Jewish woman with two names. Her Hebrew name is Hadassah. Esther comes from a Babylonian god, Ishtar. Clearly, she and Mordecai, who's also named after Marduk, is a Babylonian god, are not so OJC, to use your acronym, Organized Jewish Community. They're clearly not what you would call the front row Jews. And the crisis transforms them. And to me, this is one of our great heroes, is someone who comes during a surge. And I think that we have to recognize that all of those October 8th Jews, that's what I said on a video, which is hopefully going to be being put up tomorrow or something, that the October 8th Jews are heroes. And we have to reflect on that. That's something really very special.
Yeah. That was beautiful. I'm going to go with something much less meaningful because he just gave you such good Torah. I'm just going to tell you that for Purim, we always like to kind of pick a theme that is very popular with the kids. So 2 years ago, it was Barbie Purim. Last year, of course, it was Wicked Purim. This year, what do you know? You seem like a crowd that might not know that the biggest movie of all time is the K-pop Demon Hunters. Okay, but so this year, we are doing a K-pop Demon Hunters Purim. And Rumi, who is kind of the main character who gets to sing the song Golden, she's half demon, so she's biracial. And I can't believe that I am going to be on the bima of Central Synagogue as a biracial Korean character who is going to be singing Korean on my bima, and it's actually fitting for Purim. And I'm very excited that, like, I will be able to have all my identities will all be coming together for Purim.
You are... You are finally at home.
Yes. And you, what are you doing? Or give us some Torah.
Well, I'm not going to give away what I'm dressing up as or what the Purim spiel is about, because Arthur would be disappointed if I did. But everyone should be celebrating in your respective communities. The best I have is a lesser-known moment at the end, which speaks to me this year. The rabbis were troubled by the idea that the Torah was given under duress at Mount Sinai, which we read about just a few weeks ago. And so the story of Esther concludes towards its later chapters with a passage that the mitzvot of Purim, kiblu v'kimu, that they were accepted and established by the Jews of Shushan at the time. And the rabbis have a much more expansive view of that it wasn't just referring to the story of Purim in that community, but it resolved this legal conundrum that the Jews accepted the entirety of their identities with volition in a way that had been under duress during the time of Mount Sinai. And for me, I think I just feel very aware that everyone in this moment is a Jew by choice. Everyone in this moment is a Zionist by choice. And everyone in this moment has to accept upon themselves the mitzvot, the responsibilities, and the joys of what it means to be a Jew today. So with that, I thank Rabbi Buchdahl, Rabbi Steinmetz.
You.
Rabbi Cosgrove.
And
Rabbi Cosgrove.
I'm going to
Rabbi
ask
Kaufman.
everyone to please give Rabbi Buchdahl a moment, because there's a book signing immediately to follow outside, and she'll greet you outside. Thank you so much for being here.